District Court Number 6 stood in the oldest part of the city, surrounded by narrow streets and crumbling buildings that seemed to lean inward, as if they were trying to listen to what happened inside. Officially, it was an ordinary court where cases were heard and verdicts were passed, but unofficially, people avoided it whenever possible. Lawyers requested transfers, clerks quit without explanation, and even hardened criminals showed visible fear when their cases were assigned there. Rumors clung to the place like dust. Rumors that the walls remembered voices, that the benches absorbed pain, and that no judgment ever truly ended once spoken inside that courtroom. Judge Sikandar Rauf did not believe in such nonsense. At 48 years old, he was known for his cold efficiency and strict interpretation of the law. He believed justice required emotional distance, that sympathy weakened judgment, and that hesitation created corruption. When he was transferred to District Court Number 6 to reduce its backlog, he accepted without hesitation, convinced that fear only existed where discipline did not. On his first day, however, something felt wrong the moment he stepped inside. The air was unnaturally cold, and when he placed his hands on the wooden judge's bench, the surface felt icy, as though it had never known warmth. The ticking clock on the wall sounded irregular, each second followed by a brief, uncomfortable pause that made the silence heavier than noise. The court peon, a thin man named Rashid with permanently tired eyes, leaned toward him and quietly suggested that if hearings ran late, verdicts should be postponed until the next day. Sikandar dismissed the advice sharply, reminding him that justice was not governed by superstition or convenience. Rashid nodded, but fear lingered on his face, the kind that came from experience rather than imagination. The first case that day was State versus Naifs Banu, a woman accused of murdering her husband. The evidence was strong enough to satisfy any legal standard: a bloodstained knife, witnesses, and no alibi. Throughout the trial, Naifs Banu did not cry or defend herself. She simply stared at Judge Sikandar, her gaze steady and unsettling. When he delivered the verdict of life imprisonment, the courtroom relaxed, but before she was taken away, she spoke calmly and said that the verdict was not his to give. Laughter rippled through the room, but Sikandar felt something tighten in his chest. He dismissed the comment as defiance and ordered her removal, yet her faint smile stayed with him long after the court adjourned. That night, sleep refused to come easily. When it finally did, Sikandar found himself standing alone in the courtroom. The benches were empty, the lights flickered weakly, and names were carved into the walls. Hundreds of them, etched deeply into stone. Every name belonged to someone he had sentenced. A voice echoed through the room, telling him that he judged files while the court judged truth. He woke suddenly at exactly 3:33 in the morning, drenched in sweat and unable to shake the feeling that something had watched him sleep. The second case involved a man named Arif Mahmood, charged with child trafficking. He cried openly, swore innocence, and begged for mercy, but the circumstantial evidence was convincing enough to support conviction. Sikandar ignored the doubt rising in his mind and sentenced him to death. As Arif was dragged away, he screamed that the woman from the previous case knew the truth about the court. Rashid turned pale, crossing himself silently. That night, Sikandar dreamed again of the courtroom, but this time the positions were reversed. He sat in the dock, powerless, while unseen figures watched him with silent expectation. Determined to put an end to his unease, Sikandar demanded access to the old records room, a place filled with decades of forgotten files. Rashid tried to stop him, warning that no one entered after sunset, but Sikandar went anyway. Inside, he discovered a disturbing pattern. The verdicts were legally correct, but morally rotten. Confessions obtained under pressure, evidence ignored for the sake of efficiency, appeals dismissed to maintain statistics. In one file, at the very bottom, was a handwritten note stating that the court remembered. The ink looked fresh, as if it had been written that same day. Soon after, Sikandar began hearing whispers during hearings. They were not voices, but thoughts that did not belong to him, accusing him of rushing judgments and hiding behind procedure. Every afternoon, the clock stopped at exactly 3:33, yet no one else seemed to notice. One morning, a new case file appeared on his desk with no name, no crime, only a single line stating that a verdict was pending. Rashid refused to touch it, saying the case was not meant for the living. When court began, Unfamiliar people filled the benches, their faces pale and wrong, their eyes empty. They sat silently, waiting,